Welcome to this edition of A Conversation with the Chairman. I'm Neil Morgan, York County Administrator. I'm joined by Sheila Knoll. Mrs. Knoll is Chairman of the Board of Supervisors for the calendar year 2018. Last time we met and had this discussion, we talked about accomplishments during the fiscal year that's now drawing to a close.
The last meeting that we had, I talked about how important the budget was to everybody, and it is sort of forms the basis of what the county operations are about for the coming year. And I don't feel any differently about that, but I'm very pleased that this budget was a strong budget. We were able to accomplish what we wanted to accomplish, I hope, without having a tax increase. And
always a good thing.
And that's always a good thing. And I was really happy to see the relationship that we've been building with the school administration and the school board. And I think we started out with that, with the joint meeting that we had early on. And we sat around the table and we talked about what we thought our needs were going to be. They talked about what they thought their needs were going to be. And I think conversation like that, the more that you interact with people, the more you get to understand their point of view, and you can come to a compromise better that way. So I was very happy about that. And then even more so when you were able to fully fund the school budget this year. And then following up with Dr. Shandor and some of the school board members actually coming to the board public hearing and supporting our budget. I think that was very nice. I think that it's the first time that I ever recall that happening.
Really?
And I think that is
Hopefully not the last.
I hope it's not. I hope it's the first of many times, because I think we've opened the door, opened the windows, and there's more transparency and understanding among the two groups. And I think that's, after all, we're all into this for the children. The other things that I thought with the budget were very good was that one of our, we just talked about education, that is one of our priorities, but public safety is another one of our priorities. And this year in the budget, we were able to cover an increase in the number of fire and life safety personnel, as well as a few more of the sheriff's deputies. Mm-hmm. And we always try to make their lives more efficient and better able to serve the citizens. And I think by replacing the I'll call them computers.
So MDTs,
MDT.
Mobile Data Terminals. Modern law enforcement agencies have computers in their vehicles that are hardened devices that are a little more rugged than a typical computer.
How do they make their job better?
Well, it allows them to access data when, for example, they're in a potentially dangerous situation. They're deciding whether a vehicle maybe is stopped and whether they need to approach the vehicle as though it might be someone that's a threat, whether there's outstanding warrants. They can immediately access data, and it allows them to do all of the report writing that's a necessary part of the job without necessarily driving to some building and going into an office.
Now, are we adding anything to for the fire and life safety along that line?
Well, as a matter of fact, we are and to the average citizen, it really doesn't make much difference whether it's in the capital budget or the operating budget. But these MDTs for both the Sheriff's Department and for fire and life safety are in the capital budget component of the budget that you just approved. So whereas the positions are on the operating budget side.
That's part of personnel, and that's the operating budget. And I know you've been very focused on personnel and the fact that we need to retain people, and we also need to recruit people. You also have a problem with succession. So what are you doing about all of that these days?
Obviously the compensation for employees and trying to limit the growth of the cost of health care are important for our workforce. We want to do right by our employees for lots of reasons. But as a practical matter, we have a tight labor market. We're competing with 17 other localities in Hampton Roads for sheriff's deputies, paramedics, social service workers, heavy equipment operators, mechanics, IT specialists, accountants. And one of the other board strategic priorities, which has long been a tradition of York County, is outstanding customer service.
That's right.
It's a practical matter. You're not going to have outstanding customer service if you don't recruit, retain, and motivate a capable staff.
And that's right. And while you were talking, you mentioned health care, and I think that's something that I didn't mention before, but it's so very important because it's the first time that I can really remember that we are working closely together with the school administration and our own people to try to put our healthcare system together because there's economy of scale, if you will, without taking away from the benefits that they already have. And where are we with that at this point?
So right as we're filming this show, we're in a joint procurement with the schools, reviewing our options for healthcare. And sometime this summer, we'll have to make some decisions.
Mm-hmm.
But because we've already agreed to this joint procurement,
Mm-hmm.
it's pretty clear based on preliminary information that both the county and the school system are going to enjoy some savings. And the way health services are delivered to our staff,
Mm-hmm.
The cost savings would potentially be shared by both the employer, the county, and the school system,
That'd be
and
great.
the employees.
Mm-hmm.
This year, for the first time since I've been here, we were able to hold the line on healthcare costs and not pass on any increase.
That's great.
You know, it's difficult when somebody gets a small salary increase and then a good chunk
all
of it
eaten up by
goes
healthcare.
healthcare. So we
And that's
we
what's
were able
been
to not
happening.
do that this
That's right.
year, and obviously we would prefer to be able to do that in future years. And this partial combining of the healthcare systems, having a larger pool, will improve the possibility of that. Of course, what goes on with healthcare is a gigantic issue, and it's not totally under our control.
Mm-hmm.
But when you talk to employees, whether they're school teachers or firefighters, nothing is more important to the conditions
right.
of their work than
The
that.
healthcare. And you know, we were talking about the budget before, and I was very happy to be able to say we could meet that budget without a tax increase. But we've run into a little bit of a problem, haven't we, towards the end? And how are you going to handle that?
So, as you know, this particular budget was odd in that there were several big variables swirling around
Yes.
right at the end of the process. Among those, the state was late with their budget. We were waiting to find out whether Senate Bill 942, the tourism promotion effort, was going to happen or not. And then we had a sort of a negative surprise on the revenue side. The court-appointed citizen board called the Board of Equalization is the entity that anyone who is dissatisfied with their assessment can appeal to. And
Right.
every 2 years, some people go there, and usually it's not very consequential. Some go up a little, some
Okay.
go down a little. This year, we were surprised and disappointed that our second largest taxpayer, Plains, the oil depot, the successor entity to where the refinery used to be, appealed their assessment and got, from their perspective, a very good result. From our perspective, a very bothersome result,
That's right.
because we lost about $1.4 million of revenue.
That is a lot to have to swallow, if you will.
Essentially half of the new revenue that was in the operating budget
Mm-hmm.
as I had originally proposed it. And we're looking at that decision, and we have some ability to review it and appeal it. But in general, from what I know right this minute, the conditions at that business are not good, and probably a good chunk of that revenue is
gone forever.
Is gone forever.
But I think the public really needs to understand with the Board of Equalization is indeed appointed by the circuit judge, not by the Board of Supervisors. It's made up of 5 citizens, but they're at large. They don't always come from the 5 districts. But they get some training, and the training is important because they have to meet the needs of the citizens who come before them.
Yeah, and generally, you know, they've done a competent job in their role, and as I said, you know, most of the reviews aren't really that consequential because
But
of the
this
amount
one was
of
really
dollars.
a shock.
Right. Yeah.
This one was a shock. What can we do about it? But
yeah.
we've got other money coming in someplace along the way. I've got my fingers crossed.
Right. So there's been some yay boo situations with this budget.
Yes.
The state budget. Hopefully, by the time people are watching the show, we have a state budget.
Yes.
We have reason to believe it's going to be resolved in the very near future. And on the county side, the differences between the various versions of the state budget are really not that significant. But on the school side, it could be a swing of several $100,000. We're hopeful that the final decisions at the state level will be favorable for the schools. And if that is the case, the superintendent and I have discussed how we could use those additional dollars to further enhance school security. So,
Yes, that's the point.
so I'm hopeful that when we amend the budget in July, both because of the state and SB 942, that we'll be able to do some more on the school security side. Which brings us to SB 942.
Okay.
You want to take a shot at that?
Well, I'll take a quick shot at that.
All
That
right.
was a bill that was introduced by Senator Thomas Norman, and the purpose of the bill was to enhance the tourism funding for the historic triangle. What it is amounts to is a 1% or 1 cent a tax increase in the sales tax, but it does not cover the groceries that you buy, the food that you buy for home consumption, if you will. And it doesn't include buying large items like an automobile,
Right.
for example. But it does mean that it will cover your restaurant costs, but it spreads it over everybody, not just the homeowners who have to pay the real estate tax. And you know we've been looking for something like that for a long, long time. We've touched on the tobacco tax, we've touched on the meals tax, we've asked for equity, and this is the first time that we have something that perhaps will be beneficial without our having to raise the real estate tax. And from the way I understand it is half of that percent will go towards enhancing the tourism opportunities for funding and marketing and so forth. And the other half will come back to the counties or the jurisdictions where the money has been spent.
But I think maybe something that's important for citizens to understand about that is we're not just promoting tourism in Williamsburg for the sake of it.
Oh, no.
That is a very important part of the economic base of your county. I don't have an exact number, but I would estimate that 15 or 20% of our current revenue budget
Comes from
is
tourism.
generated by tourism, whether that's professional license fees,
Wow.
real estate taxes, meals tax, sales tax, lodging tax. So if the region does a better job bringing tourists to the area, our economy and our budget
Sure.
will benefit from that half. Now the other half of the money, honestly, I've been more following more closely because it's the 0.5% that would come to the county. And
And what are your plans for that?
well, at this time, we believe that that's going to be a net increase of sales tax revenue to the county of approximately $4 million.
I was going to ask you what that was, so I'm glad you said what it was.
So our all funds budget is about $205 million. So from that perspective, we're talking about a 2% increase in revenue. Of course, now right off the top, against that $4 million, you net out the $1.4 million that we lost in the surprise for the planes, but still we come out ahead by
Yes.
more than $2.5 million.
That's right. And some of our citizens were a little bit upset with the bill initially because it talked about our doing away with the $2 rooms tax. And they seem to feel that the tourists should pay for it. Well, they are going to be paying for it also because we have to retain that tax.
My recommendation in July is going to be that we put that money into the PAYGO or cash capital account of the operating budget. In other words, we leave everything else as approved. We park the money there. That was the fourth priority in my original budget recommendation, the one that I had to report that I had really not achieved, which was building up our PAYGO. And maybe you want to just explain why that's critical.
Well, actually, I would like to do that because I think the citizens need to understand that it's important that we have as much cash flow into our CIP as we possibly can, a certain percentage of it at any rate, because the more cash we can put in, the less we have to borrow, and the less strain we put on the budgets going down the road. So pay as you go or PAYGO or whatever you want to call it, I think it's still an excellent way for us to go. And I'm happy that we will still be able to do some of this. You've got the library coming up that you're doing. You've got school issues that need to be paid for. We've got
Other facilities we know
other
coming.
facilities that need to be covered. And the more that we could put cash into that, the better we're going to be.
So the practical impact of that is 3 or 4 years from now, we would not be forced to consider some other type of tax increase to cover our credit card bill for facilities. If
That's true.
Instead of a big credit card bill, a significant percentage of that is paid for with cash. So that's the initial plan. Obviously,
But you know,
every year
also
we look at
when
it.
you're talking about that, who knows whether the interest rates will go up?
And the higher they
And
get,
the higher their interest rates,
the
the
more-
more it costs us,
and
and
the
the less
better-
we can do with our money.
and the more favorable PAYGO becomes in a
That's
higher
right.
interest rate environment, which seems to be the trend. If I could say one other thing about the SB 942,
Yes,
since
sir.
it's been a topic of great interest.
Okay.
And that is who pays the tax? Because yes, it's a tax. York County citizens will pay it when they shop in York County, Williamsburg, and James City. But unlike the real estate tax or the personal property tax, anybody that shops in York County contributes. So for example, everybody in Poquoson that shops in York County, all the William and Mary parents who shop in York County, a lot of people from Newport News that shop in York County, they will be contributing to our budget just like our citizens contribute to their budgets. When you go to Hampton to see a movie, you pay a 10% admissions tax.
Oh, yes, you do. I've been checking on those.
The state doesn't allow us to have an admissions tax. When you go to Newport News to eat in a restaurant, you have a 7.5-cent meals tax. The state only allows us to have a 4-cent meals tax. So when you said earlier that one of the aspects of this bill that was good is it sort of allowed the counties to kind of rebalance with the cities. It's kind of a somewhat of a
very little bit of a
there's somewhat of
rebalance.
equity. You know, we contribute to their operating budgets through the normal course of our lives, and now they're going to contribute a little bit to ours. And the final point on that, put a hard number on it. If you own the average value house in your county, which is about $300,000, you would have to spend $3,000 in purchases to pay as much of this new tax as a 1 cent increase in the real estate tax. So you can talk about this new money in terms of the real estate tax rate because that's where most of the money comes from. And if this allows us to, or greatly reduces the likelihood of a real estate tax rate increase
All
in
the
the
better.
future,
All the better.
then
All the better.
it's good.
Yeah, I don't know whether the citizens realize that when we talk about, let's say, 6% sales tax, and now it's going to go to 7% sales tax,
Right.
realize that 5% of that, where's that go?
Well, it goes to
It's
the
the
state,
Exactly. We get
the 1 cent.
1.5 cents.
And now we're going to get 1.5.
Now we're going to get 1.5 cents.
Right, right.
So that's not too much to ask people, I hope.
Well, and it's my hope that after that gets in place and it becomes routine, people will see that, you know, paying for it in the normal course of those types of transactions is preferable to a big knockdown, drag-out fight about real estate taxes.
Yes, Neil, I'm really pleased the way the budget has come together this year, and I have to thank you for that.
Well, me too, but as you know, it's never too early to start thinking about next year's challenges.
I know.
Looking in your crystal ball, where would you say the focus needs to be?
Well, Neil, the focus needs to be on infrastructure and our aging facilities. I've always been worried about that, and I think this is the time that we need to move forward with that. We're talking about the space study that we have, and we know we're going to have some accommodations for that. We know that we need to build a facility for the Sheriff's Department. I am pleased that we're finally going to look to expand the Yorktown Library. That's been necessary for a long, long time. And just look at the fact that we broke ground on a fire station. But that fire station is replacing a fire station that has been in existence for almost 60 years. And that's what we have to deal with now, I believe.
I couldn't agree with you more. You know that I think facilities is where we need to look to the future. And with the support of the Board of Supervisors, I think we'll be able to accomplish great things in the next year. Thanks for your time. Thanks for tuning in to this edition of Conversations with the Chairman. if you'd like to learn more about the FY19 York County budget, check us out online.
And Neil, thank you very much, and thank the staff for all the work they've done this past year.
You
This
bet.
has been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.